Hello everybody, it's Non-C News here, and today we've gotten a lot of recommendations today. And the first news we'll be talking about today is coming from the Russian Federation. As you probably guys already know, Vladimir Putin hosted a huge military day parade yesterday that had over 20 world leaders attending. So the Prime Minister of Armenia attended, Belarus, Brazil, Burkina Faso, Venezuela, Vietnam, Egypt, ambassadors of Israel, Indonesia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, the People's Republic of China, the Republic of the Congo, Cuba, Malaysia, Mongolia, Myanmar, Palestine, Serbia, Slovakia, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Ethiopia, and ambassadors and the defense minister of South Africa. So dozens of officials arrived in Moscow for the Victory Day parade that Vladimir Putin hosted. Before the military parade happened, Russia signed various agreements of partnership with various countries. So the first one was with Venezuela. So Venezuela and Russia signed the strategic partnership agreement. So Venezuelan ruler Nicolas Maduro and the Russian President Vladimir Putin have signed a strategic partnership agreement in Moscow. Russia and China also signed a strategic partnership deal. So Xi Jinping arrived at the Kremlin yesterday to meet with the Russian President Vladimir Putin. So I'll just go over the main statements and the main summary of the key outcomes from the meeting between Russian President Vladimir Putin and the Chinese President Xi Jinping in Moscow on May the 8th, 2025. So just before the military parade. So Putin and Xi Jinping signed a joint statement to deepen the comprehensive strategic partnership agreement between Russia and China. They agreed to increase the use of their national currencies in bilateral trade and financial transactions, aiming to reduce the dependency on external currencies, especially the US dollar. Energy collaboration. Discussions included the construction of a new gas pipeline to China, reinforcing China's role as a primary energy client for Russia. Xi Jinping obviously also attended the 80th anniversary of victory over Nazi Germany, with Chinese troops participating in the May 9th parade in Moscow in Red Square. Both leaders expressed opposition to neo-Nazism, presenting a united front against Nazism, cultural and technological cooperation. Agreements were also made to expand collaboration in sectors such as trade, energy, agriculture, aviation, aerospace, and artificial intelligence. The leaders also emphasized their commitment to a multipolar world and the defense of developing nations' rights, and criticized the US-led global order. So their official negotiations between Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping have been completed. They lasted about 3.5 hours, multiple sources reported. So according to Putin's press secretary, Dmitry Peskov, the topic of Ukraine was not actually discussed during the negotiations between Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping. This meeting underscores the deepening ties between Russia and China across various domains, reflecting their shared strategic interests and mutual support on the international stage. And obviously, now let's turn our heads to the Victory Day parade itself. So if you can see here in the bottom left corner, we can see Russia's Victory Day parade. So the parade finished and there was no incidents as many had expected. So many people did think that, there were some people that did think that Ukraine could strike the Russian Victory Day parade that was also hosting dozens of world leaders on the international stage. But the parade itself had a usual format as others in recent times. There was tanks, there was armored, there was infantry fighting vehicles, there was aircraft, so it was a bit of a usual. There was no incidents that actually happened in the Victory Day parade itself. But at the end of the Victory Day parade, Putin actually thanked and hugged North Korean soldiers on on Red Square during their Victory Day parade. So North Korean troops did not actually participate in the Red Square event, but as you probably all know, North Korean troops have now been confirmed that they were fighting for Russia in the Suja direction and actually helped Russian troops push out Ukrainian forces in the Kursk region. So that's why obviously Vladimir Putin hugged and handshaked the North Korean generals and officers. So very interesting news. And furthermore, the next news we'll be talking about today is coming from Ukraine. So we've officially gotten some news today that Russian President Vladimir Putin's Victory Day truce has now officially ended. So a couple days ago now, the Russian President Vladimir Putin declared a 3-day ceasefire in Ukraine and called the halt of all hostilities in Ukraine for the 80th anniversary of victory in the Second World War over Nazi Germany. That 3-day ceasefire has now officially ended. So along with this 3-day ceasefire ending, the Russian armed forces noted that the Ukrainians apparently and allegedly violated the 3-day ceasefire over 14,043 times, the Russian armed forces noted. According to the Russian armed forces, the Ukrainian army also made 5 attempts to break through the Russian borders in the Kursk direction, or the Suja direction here, and even the Belgorod region 5 times. So interesting news. But I should note that the Ukrainian armed forces and Zelensky did not actually vow and did not actually officially join this 3-day ceasefire. But I believe that Russia and Vladimir Putin just assumed that the Ukrainian forces would join the 3-day ceasefire. But this 3-day ceasefire has officially ended, but it seems that another ceasefire seems to be brewing, but we'll get into that in just a moment. But first we're going to be talking about the coalition of the willing meeting in the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv. So the new German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, the French President Macron, and the British and the Polish Prime Ministers Keir Starmer and Donald Tusk arrived in Kyiv, the capital city of Ukraine, for the coalition of the willing meeting. And within the coalition of the willing meeting, Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, and European leaders from the coalition of the willing have agreed that alongside strengthening Ukraine's own forces, a key element of future security guarantees should include a support contingent composed of European troops. So the European leaders are now coming up with the idea to try and make a European support contingent that will be composed of European troops that will, I quote, safeguard and give security guarantees to Ukraine. So very big news. And probably one of the most important notes that came out of the coalition of the willing meeting in Kyiv is that the European leaders of Poland, Britain, Ukraine, France and Germany have now came up with a 30-day ceasefire plan in Ukraine. So a full and unconditional ceasefire on land, sea and air for at least 30 days has been announced by the European leaders and the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. So, according to the French President Macron, Macron rules out halting military aid to Ukraine during this potential 30-day ceasefire the West proposes. So, French President Macron says that if Russia does not actually comply for the 30-day ceasefire, it must face consequences with additional sanctions and further support to Ukraine. So this 30-day ceasefire has now been is now being supported by Poland, Germany, the United Kingdom, France, and even the United States of America. So Zelensky confirms he is ready for negotiations in any format, only if Russia agrees to his ceasefire. So according to Zelensky's post on X, we share a common view, an immediate, full and unconditional ceasefire if needed for at least 30 days. We propose it to begin on Monday, the 12th of May. Sorry, we are waiting for Russia's response. So So we've officially gotten Russia's response. So Putin held a meeting, a press meeting after midnight. So Putin proposes to resume direct negotiations without any preconditions starting May the 15th in Istanbul. So Russia is now proposing to resume direct negotiations with Ukraine and Russia in the city of Istanbul. So according to Putin, those who truly seek peace cannot ignore Russia's proposal for negotiations. Russia is ready for serious talks with Ukraine aimed at addressing the root causes of the conflict. And along with that statement, Putin actually held a phone conversation with the president of Turkey, Erdogan, and Erdogan and Putin held a telephone conversation. And according to news we've gotten, Erdogan told Putin about Turkey's readiness to host negotiations between Russia and Ukraine. The Turkish president also said that the window of opportunity had opened for resolving the conflict in Ukraine. So Putin is now offering the Ukrainian delegation to meet with the Russian delegation on the 15th of May. So very big news. So to go back to that Putin meeting and press conference he made, he also stated that Russia is serious about negotiations aiming to address the root causes of the conflict. Russia expressed gratitude to foreign leaders for their efforts to help end the Ukrainian crisis. Russia is seeking a long-term peace settlement through dialogue. Putin did not rule out the possibility of reaching a ceasefire during talks with Ukraine, and the Russian proposal is now on the table. And according to Vladimir Putin, now it's up to Ukraine and its Western backers to respond to his proposal for direct negotiations in Istanbul next Thursday. The next news we've got today is coming from the Vatican City, and obviously we've got news that a new Pope has officially been elected. So Pope Leo the 14th has been elected as the new Pope of the Catholic Church. So here are some key points about the newly elected Pope Leo the 14th. So Robert Francis was born in Chicago in 1955 and was elected as Pope Leo the 14th on May the 8th, 2025, becoming the first American-born Pope. He holds a dual citizenship in the United States and Peru, reflecting his extensive missionary work in Peru, where he served as a bishop. In Pope Leo's first address, he greeted the crowd with "Peace be with you all," emphasizing a message of peace and unity, and his global reactions on his election. His election has been met with widespread acclaim, including congratulations from global leaders and celebrations in both the United States and Peru. Obviously, Donald Trump is very pleased with this election because obviously this is the first American-born Pope. And the next news we'll be talking about today is coming from France. So, remember in the last video we talked about how the Syrian President Ahmad al-Shara arrived in Paris and was received by the French President Macron in the capital city of France. So here is a quick summary of the Syrian President Ahmad al-Shara's meeting with the French President Macron in Paris on May the 7th, 2025. So this was the Syrian president's first trip to Europe since assuming office in December 2024. Al-Shara, the Syrian president, previously under the UN terrorism sanctions, was granted a special exemption to meet with the President of France. Key discussions and topics were talked about, like Syria's sovereignty and territorial integrity,
protection of minority groups, including the Alawites and Druze population, counter-terrorism efforts and regional stability, international aid and potential sanction reliefs to support Syria's economic recovery. Macron, the French president, empathized and urged al-Shara, the Syrian president, to ensure the protection of all Syrians without exemption following the recent attacks on minority communities. Al-Shara confirmed ongoing indirect negotiations with Israel aimed at de-escalating tensions. Al-Shara also highlighted the need for international support for Syria's reconstruction, with costs estimated over 250 billion US dollars. So that was the main summary points of the French and Syrian meeting in Paris. The next news we've got today is coming from Iran. So we've got news that the Iranian Army's Air Force published videos showing the US Navy ships and fighter jets coasting along the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf, or the newly renamed Sea of the Iranian Gulf, not the Persian Gulf. But if you can see here in the bottom left corner, the Iranian Air Force has actually published videos showing US and US fighter jets coasting along the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf in its crosshairs, reminding that to the US that they're being watched in the Red Sea. So obviously you can see here, even the US aircraft carriers were being monitored and spied on by the Iranian Air Force. So very interesting news. We've also got news today that the fourth round of nuclear talks between the United States and Iran have begun in Muscat, in the capital city of Oman. So this is the fourth nuclear meeting between Iran and the United States. So I'll keep you updated what happens there. And furthermore, the next news we've got today is coming from India and Pakistan. So, if you remember in the last video, we talked about how Pakistan shot down 5 Indian jets, including 3 Rafale French-designed jets, Russian or Soviet MiG-29 designed jets, and an Su-30 fighter jet. So, according to information we've gotten, these 5 Indian fighter jets were shot down due to a huge dogfight that happened, and was actually one of the largest and longest dogfights in recent aviation history, CNN reports. So a total of 125 fighter jets battled for over 1 hour, with neither side leaving its airspace. So the missiles exchanges were happening at a distance of sometimes greater than 160 kilometers. So the dogfight between Pakistani and Indian jets, which Pakistani officials says that it downed 5 Indian planes, was one of the largest and longest in recent aviation history, a senior Pakistani security source told CNN. And furthermore, we've also gotten some news that happened a couple days ago, that the Indian Armed Forces launched and conducted a wave of strikes using Israeli-made Harop kamikaze drones, targeting huge Pakistani cities like Lahore and many other Pakistani cities. So in total, 25 explosives were reported. 7 of them were in the Pakistani capital itself, and in recent videos shared on social media shows the moment of Indian drones striking Pakistan. And with this huge Indian drone strike that happened a couple days ago, footage circulating online shows air defense systems engaging the incoming drones, and according to reports, several Pakistani air defense assets were destroyed during the raid. And if you can see here in the bottom left corner, we can see the video from the Indian drone airstrikes, and this video shows Pakistani air defense units engaging Indian drones over the Pakistani city of Lahore. We've also got news that yesterday we had huge reports of Indian army shelling. So we can see here in the bottom left corner, we can see huge Indian and Pakistani shellings on the border zones of the Indian and Pakistani borders. But probably one of the biggest news we've got today is that India and Pakistan have agreed to a full and immediate ceasefire Trump has just announced. So Donald Trump has announced that after a long night of talks mediated by the United States has announced that India and Pakistan have agreed to a full and immediate ceasefire, and Donald Trump congratulated both countries of using common sense and great intelligence. This was also confirmed by Pakistani's foreign minister. So, according to the Prime Minister of Pakistan, we have won. This is victory. So, Pakistani Prime Minister claimed victory over India following the ceasefire, the US ceasefire between India and Pakistan. And following the US ceasefire that was brokered between between Pakistan and India, India is now releasing water towards Pakistan from the Chenab River. Following the ceasefire agreement, India has partially opened the splitways of the dam on the Chenab River, allowing flow of water to resume towards Pakistan. This development comes in wake of a ceasefire agreement between the two countries. Early in the conflict between Pakistan and India, India had completely blocked the dam's flow, effectively cutting off water supply downstream to Pakistan. So it seems that things are now getting better between Pakistan and India, but even though this ceasefire happened, there are still reports of explosions. So, just after 4 hours of the ceasefire, explosions have again been heard in the Kashmir region here, highlighted in orange and red. So both sides blame each other for breaking it. So even though the ceasefire is now in place, it seems that there are still explosions that are taking place right now. And furthermore, the last news we've got today is coming from the United States. So we've got news today that Trump is very happy with trade talks with China. So yesterday we had news that Chinese and American delegations arrived in Geneva, a city in Switzerland here, for economic talks. So China and the United States started economic talks in Geneva. So Chinese delegation is led by Vice Premier He Lifelin, and the US delegation is led by the US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. So this is the first high-level meeting between China and the United States since the Trump administration imposed high tariffs on Chinese goods. So the details of the agenda have not been disclosed yet, but however, the Chinese Foreign Ministry has made a number of statements in connection with the US and Chinese economic talks in Geneva. So the meeting in Switzerland took place at the initiative of the United States, according to the Chinese ministry. China's position has not changed. The current tariffs war was started by the United States, and if the American side really wants to resolve the issue through dialogue and negotiations, it should stop pressuring and start negotiations with China on the basis of equality and mutual respect, again coming from the Chinese ministry, and China will firmly safeguard its legitimate rights and interests to uphold international justice and safeguard the rules of the World Trade Organization and mutual trading systems. So there are the only points we've gotten from the US and Chinese trade negotiations that are happening in Geneva and Switzerland. We'll probably get more news about the economic talks tomorrow. And furthermore, the last news we've gotten from the United States today and altogether today is that Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense of the United States, confirms trans troops out of the United States Department of Defense. So Pete Hegseth says that any service member with gender dysphoria will be asked to leave, then kicked out of the American Armed Forces. So according to Pete Hegseth, This is what the American people voted for. And that's all the news I actually have for you today. I'm non-seeing news. I'll try and provide you news that medias around the world do not show you. I do these videos hopefully daily, so consider subscribing and liking. If you want to see more news like this, I have a Telegram channel in the link in the description below. So if you want to get news that I can't fit in these YouTube videos, consider joining the Telegram. And if you want to support me personally, consider joining as a member of the channel or donating in the link in the description below. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all later. Bye.